On behalf of TrustWave Government Solutions and CARAHCAST, we would like to welcome you to today's podcast, focused around the Cybersecurity Executive Order, 10 database security best practices to help meet mandates, where you will hear from data experts at TrustWave Government Solutions, share the greatest risks organizations face when it comes to database security, and tips to create a strong database security program.
Thanks everyone for being able to join us today. For those that are listening live, to start off, I just want to quickly go over what we're planning to share with you today to help you to better understand how you and your agencies can protect and secure the databases within your environment in line with the executive order and how you can work towards meeting those executive order requirements. We're going to go over what the importance of protecting databases and sensitive data is, what the NIST defined security measures are for protecting critical software. Then Joe and I are going to talk through 10 database security best practices that will help you in meeting those mandates as well as securing your databases. And then I'll finish off by talking through a proven methodology that we've seen successful over 20 years of experience in working with agencies in the federal government as well as commercial organizations to achieve database security. To start us off then, I'd like to just share the importance of protecting databases and sensitive data as it relates to the Cybersecurity Executive Order 1428. Most all of you are very aware by now with the May executive order that came out, the direction that came from it, as well as the following information that has come from NIST, come from CISA and other organizations to define what critical software is and the security measures that are needed or recommended to be able to meet the guidance around the executive order. With this, there's been clear information that's been shared related to what should be done around this and timeframes that were given in a memorandum put out by the Executive Office of the President, the Office of Management and Budget on August 10th. It was clearly defined that agencies had 60 days to identify all agency critical software in use and or that was in acquisition process. And then now you have 1 year to be able to incorporate the defined security measures for these specific categories of critical software, as well as those categories that will come out later on in relation to what is deemed critical software or what is deemed as a direct software dependency. And we'll talk about that here today. NIST specifically called out that any software that has or has direct software dependencies upon one or more components with at least one of the following items is deemed a critical software. Information related to running with elevated privileges, direct or privileged access to network and computer resources designed to control access to data or operational technology, performing a function of critical to trust, or operating outside of the normal trust boundaries. All of these items help define what is that critical software definition. Each organization, agency should have gone through the process of determining what is critical software within your environment. This goes along with what the Binding Operating Directive 18-02 and the CDM program has been directing for many years now on prioritizing and identifying, reporting, and scanning all security or HEVAs for security. Those HVAs are inclusive of critical software applications that are now being defined by NIST to establish a single agency proof of point of contact and then timely remediation of these. And then in addition to that is OMB's 19-02 and 03 directive around reaffirming that the focus on HVAs and reporting of those and reinforcing the CDM guidance is all in line with what is coming forward here with the executive order. One of the key things I want to bring out is the fact that as we look at these items, the executive order doesn't specifically call out names of software, but gives us these guidance and directions. And they further clarify that the term of direct software dependencies, and that is defined as other software components that are directly integrated into or necessary for operation of software instances in question. These software applications that help drive the critical software that is being utilized by agencies can be many-fold. And those, as we would like to talk about today, at the core of this, databases are a part of that direct software dependency. Without integration of databases and the data that drives those applications, whether they be on-premise software as a service or other applications, those applications will not have function. And so databases are securely in the realm and the radar of direct software dependencies. With that understanding of those direct software dependencies, we'd like to go through and talk about how NIST is giving guidance to giving direction around securing these direct software dependencies and specifically databases. NIST came out and provided several objectives. We'll talk through 4 objectives today and the specific security measures that go and align with those. The first objective that I'd like to speak to today is that of protecting executive order critical software and critical software platforms from unauthorized access and usage. Of the security measures that were given, the 3 that specifically fit into protection of databases are listed here. Measure 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. As we look at these all help us to be able to understand the importance of being able to determine who has access to the information, what type of information you have, and then how can you protect that. So identifying and authenticating each service that's attempting to have access to that database, knowing the privileged access that is given, whether it be a user, a service accounts, an application, and being able to put in place the principle of least privilege to manage that. And then employing boundary protections, network segmentation, isolation, software-defined perimeters for this. I'd like you to share a couple of best practices, and we'll go into a lot more detail later on as Joe and I talk about this, but some of the best practices around this specific service or security measure is to limit user rights access. Put in place that principle of least privilege, know who has access, what has access, and determine whether or not they should have access to that specific information. You need to discover those privileged users and service accounts, remediate any that should not have access, and then enforce that principle of least privilege, setting baselines around acceptable use for users and service accounts, and then monitoring the activity of those users with the use of machine learning to detect if there's any type of anomalies around the privileged user access.